Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I have a microburst. Kidding. Fun times. Manly P. Hall. I haven't touched him in like almost 3 weeks. I do apologize. Because he only gets better. Before I begin, Amish mindset. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Sharing is caring, and it helps get the word out to more people. And if you get anything from my work, a mic drop, an epiphany, a connect the dot, a new book to read, a new author to be exposed to, please consider supporting my work and supporting me in my journey of hell. This next section is section 8, Isis, the Virgin of the World. I have co-host over here showing me her little butt. Poor thing is hot. It's very humid. So bear with me. My fan is on. If you hear it, I do apologize. She took my book spot. The little ass. It is especially fitting that a study of Hermetic symbolism should begin with the discussion of the symbols and attributes of the static Isis. This is Isis of Sais, famous for the inscription concerning her which appeared on the front of her temple in the city. I, Isis, am all that has been, that is, or shall be. No mortal man have ever me unveiled. Plutarch affirms that many ancient authors believed that the goddess to be the daughter of Hermes. Others held the opinion that she was the child of Prometheus. Both of these demigods were noted for their divine wisdom. It is not improbable that her kinship to them is merely allegorical. Plutarch translates the name Isis to mean wisdom. Godfrey Higgins, in his Anacalypsis, derives the name of Isis from the Hebrew, I don't know the Hebrew scripture here, the letters Iso, and Greek to save. Some authorities, however, for example, Richard Payne Knight, as stated in the symbolical language of ancient art and mythology, believe the word to be northern extraction, possibly Scandinavian or Gothic. In these languages, the name is pronounced Isa, meaning ice. The rune for Isa is that one. Yes, I have runes. Yeah, I didn't hack away yet. Or water, its most passive crystallized negative state. This Egyptian deity, under many names, appears as the principle of natural fecundity. Among nearly all the religions of the ancient world, she was known as the goddess with 10,000 appellations and was metamorphosized by Christianity into the Virgin Mary. For Isis, although she gave birth to all living things, chief among them the sun, still remained a virgin, according to the legendary accounts. Apulus, in the 11th book of the Golden Ass, like I'm serious, ascribes to the goddess the following statement concerning her powers and attributes. Behold, I move by the prayers at present with thee. I, who am nature, the parent of things, the queen of all the elements, the primordial progeny of ages, the supreme of divinities, the sovereign of the spirits of the dead, the first of the celestials, and the uniform resemblance of gods and goddesses. I who rule by my node the luminous summits of the heavens, the salivorous breezes of the seas, and the deplorable silences of the realms, beneath whose one divinity the whole orb of the earth venerates under a manifold form, by different rites and variety of appellations. Hence the primogenial Bulgarians call me Pesinusia, I'm not pronouncing that right, the mother of the gods, the Attic Aborigines, Cisporian Minerva, the floating Cyprians, Papian Venus, arrow-bearing Creations, Diana, Dictania, the three-tongued Sicilians, Stygian Prosperine, and the Aleutianans, the ancient goddess Ceres. Some also call me Juno, others Bellona, others Hecate, and others Rhamnusia, and those who are illuminated by the anticipant rays of the divinity of the sun when he rises, rise. The Ethiopians, the Ari, and the Egyptians skilled in ancient learning, worshipping me by ceremonies perfectedly appropriate, called me by my true name, Queen Isis. Lee Progon believes that the Egyptian myth of Isis had a historical basis among the Mayas of Central America, where this goddess was known as Queen Mu, like moo cow. In Prince Co, the same author finds a correspondence to Osiris, the brother husband of Isis. Lee Pagon's theory is that Mayan civilization was far more ancient than that of Egypt. After the death of Prince Ka, his widow Queen Mu, fleeing to escape the wrath of the murderess, sought refuge among the Mayan colonies in Egypt, where she was accepted as their queen and was given the name Isis. While Lee Pagon may be right, the possible historical queen sinks into insignificance when compared with the allegorical symbolical world virgin, and the fact that she appears among so many different races, peoples discredits the theory that she was a historical individual. According to Sextus Empiricus, the Trojan War was found over a statue of the moon goddess. For this lunar Helena, and not for a woman. The Greeks and Trojans struggled to the gates of Troy. Several authors have attempted to prove that Isis, Osiris, Typhon, Nephileus, Thoth, or Mercury were grandchildren of the great Jewish patriarch Noah by his son Ham. But as the story of Noah and his ark is a cosmic allegory concerning the repopulation of planets at the beginning of each world period, it only makes it less likely that they were historical personages. According to Robert Flood, the sun has three properties: life, light, and heat. These three vivify and vitalize the three worlds: spiritual, intellectual, and material. Therefore, it is said, from one light, three lights. The first three master masons. In all probability, Osiris represents the third, or material aspect of solar activity, which by beneficent influences vitalizes and enlivens the flora and fauna of the earth. Osiris is not the sun, but the sun is symbolic of the vital principle of nature, which the ancients knew as Osiris. His symbol, therefore, was an open eye in honor of the great eye of the universe, the sun. Opposed to the active, radiant principle of impregnating fire, heat, and motion was the passive, receptive principle of nature. Modern science has proved the forms, ranging in magnitude from solar systems to atoms, are composed of positive radiant nuclei surrounded by negative bodies that exist upon the emanations of the central life. From this allegory, we have the story of Solomon and his wives, for Solomon is the sun, and his wives and concubines are the planets, moons, asteroids, and other receptive bodies within his house, the solar mansion. Isis represents in the Song of Solomon by the dark maiden of Jerusalem, is symbolic of receptive nature, the watery material principle, which creates all things out of herself after impregnation has been achieved by the virility of the sun. In the ancient world, the year had 360 days. The 5 extra days were gathered together by the god of cosmic intelligence to serve as the birthdays of the 5 gods and goddesses who are called the sons and daughters of Ham. Upon the first of these special days, Osiris was born, upon the 4th of them, Isis. The number 4 shows the relation that the goddess bears to the earth and its elements. Typhon, the Egyptian demon or spirit of the adversary, was born upon the 3rd day. Typhon is often symbolized by a crocodile. Sometimes his body is a combination of crocodile and hog. Isis stands for knowledge and wisdom, according to Plutarch. The word Typhon means insolence and pride. Egotism, self-centeredness, and pride are the deadly enemies of understanding and truth. This is part the allegory is revealed. Very interesting how different perceptions of how the days and the years come into like 360, 365, Enoch 364. It's very interesting how each of those authors or illuminaries or whatever have you gives their personal take on what came in terms of that. Very interesting. Sorry guys, it's too hot. It's closely getting as long to my tailbone. After Osiris had here symbolized as a sun, had become king of Egypt and had given to his peoples the full advantage of his intellectual light, he continued his path through the heavens, visiting the peoples of other nations and converting all with whom he came into contact. Plutarch further asserts that the Greeks recognized in Osiris the same person whom they revered under the names of Dionysus and Bacchus. While he was away from his country, his brother Typhon, the evil one, or Typhoon, like the Loki of Scandinavia, plotted against the sun god to destroy him. Gathering 72 persons as fellow conspirators, he obtained his nefarious end in a most subtle manner. He had a wonderful ornament box made just the size of his body, of Osiris. This he brought into a banquet hall where the gods and goddesses were feasting together. All admired the beautiful chest, and Typhon promised to give it to one whose body fitted it most perfectly. One after another lay down in the box, but in disappointment rose again until last Osiris also tried. The moment he was in the chest, Typhon and his accomplices nailed the cover down and sealed the cracks with molten lead. They then cast the box into the Nile, down which it floated to the sea. Plutarch states that the date upon which this occurred was the 17th day of the month Athar, when the sun was in the constellation of Scorpio. This was most significant, for the scorpion is the symbol of treachery. The time when Osiris entered the chest was also the same season that Noah entered the ark to escape the deluge. Plutarch further declares that the Pans and Satyrs, the nature spirits and elementals, first discovered that Osiris had been murdered. These immediately raised an alarm, and from this incident, the word panic, meaning fright or amazement of the multitudes, originated. Isis, upon receiving the news of her husband's murder, which she learned from some children who had seen the murderers making off the box, at once robed herself in mourning and started forth in a quest of him. At length, Isis discovered that the chest had floated to the coast of Bybos. There had lodged in the branches of a tree, which in a short miraculous grew up around the box. This is amazed the king of the country that he ordered the tree to be cut down and pillar made from its trunk to support the roof of his palace. Isis, visiting Byblos, recovered the body of her husband, but again stolen by Typhon, who cut it into 14 parts, which he scattered all over the earth. Isis, in despair, began gathering up the severed remains of her husband, but found only 13 pieces. The 14th part, the phallus, she reproduced in gold, for the original had fallen into the river Nile and had been swallowed by fish. Typhon was later slain in battle by the son of Osiris. Some of the Egyptians believed that the souls of the gods were taken to heaven, where they shone forth as stars. It was supposed that the soul of Isis gleamed from the dog star, Sirius, while Typhon became the constellation of the bear. I'm not going to tell you which that one is. It is doubtful, however, whether this idea was ever generally accepted. So, the bear constellation. Our Little Dipper, Ursa Minor. And on August 5th, Sirius rose before the sun. Ursa Minor is neighboring to Draco. The constellation, the system. So you can imagine if that is the truth, the interpretation there. Among the Egyptians, Isis often represented with a headdress consisting of empty throne chair of her murdered husband. And this peculiar structure was accepted during certain dynasties as her hieroglyphic. The headdress of the Egyptians had great symbolic, emblematic importance, for they represented the auric bodies of the superhuman intelligence and are used in the same ways that the nimbus, halo, and aureole are used in Christian religious art. Frank C. Higgins, a well-known Masonic symbolist, has astutely noted that the ornate headgears of certain gods and pharaohs are inclined backward at the same angle as the Earth's axis. The robes, insignia, jewels, and ornamentations of ancient hieroglyphics symbolize the spiritual energies radiating from the human body. Modern science is rediscovering many of the lost secrets of Hermetic philosophy. One of these is the ability to gauge the mental development, the soul qualities, and the physical health of an individual from the streamers of semi-visible electric force, which pour through the surface of the skin of every human being at all times during his life. For details concerning a science process for making the auric emanations visible, The Human Atmosphere by Dr. Walter Kleiner, J. Kleiner. Hey, don't poke your eye out. Not good. Isis is sometimes symbolized by the head of a cow. Occasionally, the entire animal is her symbol. The first gods of the Scandinavians were licked out of blocks of ice by the mother cow, Anumula, who symbolized the principle of natural nourishment and fecundity because of her milk. Occasionally, Isis is represented as a bird. She often carries in one hand the crux anista, the symbol of eternal life, and in other, the flower scepter, symbolic of her authority. Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the founder of Egyptian learning, the wise man of the ancient world, gave to the priests and philosophers of antiquity the secrets which have been preserved to this day in myth and legend. These allegories and emblematic figures conceal the secret formulae for spiritual, mental, moral, and physical regeneration, commonly known as the mystic chemistry of the soul, alchemy. These sublime truths were communicated to the initiates of the mystery schools, but were concealed from the profane. The latter, unable to understand the abstract philosophical tenets, worshipped the concrete sculptured idols, which were emblematic of those secret truths. The wisdom and secrecy of Egypt are epitomized by the Sphinx, which has preserved its secret from the secrets of 100 generations. The mysteries of Hermeticism, the great spiritual truths hidden from the world by the ignorance of the world, and the keys of the secret doctrines of ancient philosophers are symbolized by the Virgin Isis. Veiled from head to foot, she reveals her wisdom only to the tried and initiated few who have earned the right to enter her sacred presence. Tear from the veil, figure of nature is shrouded of obscurity and stand face to face with the divine reality. The explanation in these pages of the symbols peculiar to the Virgin Isis, based, unless otherwise noted, on selections from a free translation of the fourth book of Bibliothèque des Philosophes Hermetiques, entitled The Hermetical Signification, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, guys. You know how I can't project, and for those of you who are new, I am dyslexic. I also have bad teeth, and I have projection issues with certain words, syllables, and things of that nature. So I do apologize. I'm not here to sound stupid or ridiculous. But certain words don't come out of my mouth properly, and as much as I try, I do it a few times, doesn't want to come out. We kind of get the gist. Of the symbols of the attributes of Isis, with the interpolations by the compiler to apply and clarify the text. The statues of Isis were decorated with the sun, moon, and stars, and many emblems pertaining to the earth, over which Isis was believed to rule as the guardian spirit of nature personified. Several images of the goddess have been found upon which the marks of her dignity and position were still intact. According to the ancient philosophers, she personified universal nature, the mother of all productions. The deity was generally represented as a partly nude woman, often pregnant, sometimes loosely covered with a garment either of green or black color, or of 4 different shades intermingled black, white, yellow, and red. Appius describes her as follows. In the first place, then, her most copious and long hairs, being gradually entorted and promiscuously scattered on her divine neck, were softly deflorous. A multiform crown consisting of various flowers bound the sublime summit of her head, and in the middle of the crown, just on her forehead, there was a smooth orb resembling a mirror, or rather a white refulgent light, which indicated that she was the moon. Vipers rising up after the manner of furrows environed the crown on the right hand and on the left. The cerulean ears of corn were also extended from above. Her garment was of many colors and woven from the finest flax, and was at one time lucid with the white splendor, at another yellow from the flower of crocus, and another flaming with a rosy redness. But that which most excessively dazzled my sight was a very black robe, fulgured with a dark splendor, and which spreading around and passing under her right side and ascending to her left shoulder, there were rows protuberant like the center of a shield, the dependent part of the robe falling many folds and having small knots of fringe gracefully flowing in its extremities. Glittering stars were dispersed through the embroidered border of the robe, and through the whole of its surface the full moon, shining in the middle of the stars, breathed forth flaming fires. Nevertheless, a crown, wholly consisting of flowers, fruits of every kind, adhered with invisible convection to the border of the conspicuous robe in all undulating motions. What she carried in her hands also consisted of things very different in nature, for her right hand indeed bore a brazen rattled spectrum, through the narrow lumina of which bent like a belt, certain rods passing, produced a sharp triple sound through the vibrating motion of her arm. An oblong vessel in the shape of a boat depended from her left hand, on the handle of which, in part, was a conspicuous ace raised and erect head and largely swelling neck, and shoes woven from the leaves of a victorious palm tree covered her immortal feet. The green color alludes to the vegetation which covers the face of the earth and therefore represents the robe of nature. The black represents death and corruption as being the way to new life and generation. As except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. White, yellow, and red signify three principal colors of alchemical, hermetical, universal medicine after the blackness of purification is over. The ancients gave the name Isis to one of their occult medicines, therefore the description here given relates somewhat to chemistry. Her black drape also signifies that the moon or the lunar humidity, the Sophic universal mercury, and the operating substance of nature is alchemical terminology, has no light of its own, but receives its light, its fire, and its vitalizing force from the sun. Isis was the image of representative of the great works of the wise men, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and the universal medicine. Other hieroglyphics seen in connection with Isis are no less curious than those already described, but it is impossible to enumerate all, for many symbols were used interchangeably by the Egyptian Hermeticists. The goddess often wore upon her head a hat made of cypress branches to signify mourning for her dead husband and also for the physical death which she caused every creature to undergo in order to receive a new life and prosperity or a periodic resurrection. The head of Isis is sometimes ornamented with a crown of gold or a garland of olive leaves, as conspicuous marks her sovereignty as queen of the world and mistress of the entire universe. The crown of gold signifies also the Orphic crucity of sulphurous fatness of the solar and vital fires, which she dispenses to every individual by continual circulation of the elements, the circulation being symbolized by the musical rattle which she carries in her hand. The sistrum is also the ionic symbol of purity. A serpent interwoven along the olive leaves on her head, devouring its own tail, denotes the Orphic atrocity was soiled with the venom of terrestrial corruption which surrounded it, and must be mortified and purified by 7 planetary circulations or purifications called flying eagles, alchemical terminology, in order to make it medicinal for the restoration of health. Here the emanations from the sun are recognized as a medicine for the healing of human ills. The 7 planetary circulations are represented by the circumambulations of the Masonic Lodge, by the marching of the Jewish priests 7 times around the walls of Jericho, and of the Mohammedan priests 7 times around the Kaaba at Mecca. From the crown of gold projected 3 horns of plenty, signifying the abundance of gifts and nature, proceeding from one root having its origins in heavens. head of Isis. Wow. This one, guys, my goodness. Other hieroglyphics seen in connection with Isis are no less curious than those already described, but it is impossible to enumerate all, for many symbols were used interchangeably by the Egyptian Hermeticists. The goddess often wore upon her head a hat made of cypress branches to signify mourning for her dead husband and also for the physical death which she caused every creature to undergo in order to receive a new life and prosperity, or a periodic resurrection. The head of Isis is sometimes ornamented with a crown of gold, or a garland of olive leaves, as conspicuous marks her sovereignty as queen of the world, mistress of the entire universe. I'm rereading that because we are looking, when we look at Isis, we see significant symbolism, and we look at, she has a shit ton of symbolism. A lot. And it's different and in a lot of her imagery. If you look into artist renditions of Isis, it's interchangeably, there are symbolisms that always remain the same, but the headdress changes a lot. So I just wanted to point that out by rereading that. In this figure, the pagan naturalists represent all the vital powers of the three kingdoms of familiar families. Sublunary nature, mineral, plant, and animal, man considered as an animal. At one of her ears was the moon and the other the sun, to indicate that these two were the agent and patient or father-mother principles of all natural objects, and that Isis or nature makes use of these two luminaries to communicate her powers to the whole. Empire of animals, vegetables, and minerals. On the back of her neck were the characters of planets and the signs of the zodiac, which assisted the planets of their functions. This signified that the heavenly influences directed and destinies of the principles of sperms of all things, because they were the governors of the sublunary planet bodies, which they transformed into little worlds made in the image of the greater universe. Isis holds in her right hand a small sailing ship with the spindle of a spinning wheel for its mast. From the top of her mast projects a water jug, its handle shaped like a serpent, swelled with venom. This indicates that Isis steers the bark of life, full of troubles and miseries, on the stormy ocean of time. The spindle symbolizes the fact that she spins and cuts the thread of life. These emblems further signify that Isis abounds in humidity, by means of which she nourishes all natural bodies, preserving them from the heat of the sun by humidifying them with nutritious moisture from the atmosphere. Moisture supports vegetation, but this subtle humidity, life ether, is always more or less infected by some venom proceeding from corruption or decay. It must be purified by being brought into contact with the invisible cleansing fire of nature. This fire digests, perfects, and revitalizes the substance in order that the humidity may become a universal medicine to heal and renew all bodies in nature. The serpent throws off its skin annually, and thereby renewed, symbolic of the resurrection of spiritual life from the material nature. This renewal of earth takes place every spring, when the vivifying spirit of the sun returns to the countries of the northern hemisphere. The symbolic virgin carries in her left hand a sistrum and a symbol of square frame of metal, which when struck gives the keynote of nature, fa. Sometimes also an olive branch to indicate the harmony she preserves among natural things with her regenerating power. By the process of death and corruption, she gives life to a number of creatures of diverse forms through periods of perpetual change. The symbol is made square instead of the usual triangle shape in order to symbolize that all things are transmuted and regenerated according to the harmony of the four elements. Dr. Sigismund Backstrom believed that if a physician could establish harmony among the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and unite them into a stone, the Philosopher's Stone, symbolized by the six-pointed star or two interlaced triangles, he would possess the meaning of healing all disease. Dr. Backstrom further stated that there were no doubt in his mind that the universe, omnipresent fire, spirit of nature, does all and is all in all. By attraction, repulsion, motion, heat, sublimation, evaporation, excitation, inspissation, coagulation, fixation, the universal fire spirit manipulates matter and manifests throughout creation. Any individual who can understand these basic principles and adapt them to the three departments of nature becomes a true philosopher. My goodness, I want to like shoot my neighbors. You can hear the grinding concrete noise, but it's really bad, so I do apologize. From the right breast of Isis protruded a bunch of grapes, and from the left an ear of corn or a sheath of wheat, golden in color. These indicate that nature is the source of nutrition for plant, animal, and human life, nourishing all things from herself. The golden color in the weak corn indicates that in the sunlight or spiritual gold is concealed the first sperm of life. On the girdles surrounding the upper part of the body of the statue appear a number of numerous emblems. The girdle is joined together in front by four golden plates, the elements, placed in the form of a square. This signified that Isis or nature, the first matter, alchemical terminology, was the essence of four elements, life, light, heat, and force, which quintessence generated all things. Numerous stars are represented on this girdle, thereby indicating their influence in darkness as well as the influence of the sun and light. Isis is the virgin of immortalized in the constellation of Virgo, where the world mother is placed with the serpent under her feet and the crown of stars on her head. In her arms, she carries a sheaf of grain and sometimes a young sun god. This statue of Isis was placed on a pedestal of dark stone ornamented with ram's heads. Her feet trod upon a number of venomous reptiles. This indicates that the nature has power to free from acidity or saltiness, all corrosives, and to overcome all impurities from terrestrial corruption, adhering to bodies. The ram's head indicate that the most auspicious time for a generation of life is during the period when the sun passes through the sign of Aries. The serpents under her feet indicate the nature too is inclined to preserve life and heal disease by expelling impurities and corruption. In this sense, the axioms known to the ancient philosophers are verified, namely, nature contains nature, nature rejoices in her own nature, nature surmounts nature, nature cannot be amended but in her own nature. Therefore, in contemplating the statue of Isis, we must not lose sight of the occult sense of its allegories. Otherwise, the Virgin remains an inexplicable enigma. From a golden ring on her left arm, a line descends to the end of which it suspends a deep box filled with flaming coals and incense. Isis, or nature personified, carries with her the sacred fire, religiously preserved and kept burning in a special temple by the Vestal Virgins. This fire is the genuine immortal flame of nature, ethereal, essential, the author of life. The inconsumable oil, the balsam of life, so much praised by the wise and is so often referred to in the scriptures, is frequently symbolized as the fuel of this immortal flame. From the right arm of the figure also descends a thread to the end, of which fasten pair of scales to denote the exactitude of nature in her weights and measures. Isis is often represented as a symbol of justice because nature is eternally consistent. The world virgin is sometimes shown standing between two great pillars, the jacin and the bows of Freemasonry, symbolizing the fact that nature obtains productivity by means of polarity. As wisdom personified, Isis stands between the pillars of opposites, demonstrating the understanding is always found at the point of equilibrium, and the truth is often crucified between the two thieves of apparent contradiction. The sheen of gold in her dark hair indicates that while she is lunar, her power is due to the sun's rays, from which she secures her ruddy complexion. As the moon is robed in the reflected light of the sun, so Isis, like the Virgin of Revelation, is clothed in the glory of solar luminosity. Aplygius states that while he was sleeping, he beheld the venerable goddess Isis rising out of the ocean. The ancients realized that the primary forms of life first came out of water, and modern science concurs in this view. H.G. Wells, in his Outline of History describing primitive life on Earth, states, but through the oceans and intertidal water already swarmed with life, the land above the high tide line was still, so far as we can guess, a stony wilderness without a trace of life. In the next chapter, he adds, wherever the shoreline ran, there was life, and that life went on in and by with the waters as its home, its medium, and its fundamental necessity. The ancients believed that the universal sperm proceeded with water vapor, humid but fiery. The veiled Isis, whose very covering represents vapor, is symbolic of the humidity which is carried or vehicle for the sperm life of the sun, represented by a child in her arms. Because the sun, moon, and stars is setting appear to sink into the sea and also become, the water receives their rays into itself. The sea was believed to be the breeding ground for the sperm of living things. This sperm is generated from the combination of the influences of the celestial bodies. Hence, Isis is sometimes represented as pregnant. Frequently, the statue of Isis was accompanied by the figure of a large black-white ox, the ox representing either Osiris or Taurus, the bull of the zodiac, or Apis, an animal sacred to Osiris because of his particular markings and colorings. Among the Egyptians, the bull was a beast of burden. Hence, the presence of the animal was a reminder of the labors presently performed by nature, that all creatures may have life and health. Hippocrates, the god of silence, holding his finger to his mouth, often accompanies the statue of Isis. He warns all to keep the secrets of the wise from the unfit to know them. The Druids of Britain and Gaul had a deep knowledge concerning the mysteries of Isis and worshipped her under the symbol of the moon. Godfrey Higgins considers it a mistake to regard Isis as synonymous with the moon. The moon was chosen for Isis because of its dominion over water. The Druids considered the sun to be the father and the moon the mother of all things. By means of these symbols, they worshipped universal nature. The figure of Isis is sometimes used to represent the occult and magical arts, such as necromancy, invocation, sorcery, and thaumaturgy. In one of the myths concerning her, Isis is said to have conjoined the invincible god of eternities, Ra, to tell her his secret and sacred name, which he did. This name is equivalent to the lost word of masonry. By means of this word, a magician can demand obedience from the invisible and superior deities. The priests of Isis became adepts in the use of the unseen forces of nature. They understand hypnotism, mesmerism, and similar practices long before the modern world dreamed of their existence. Plutarch describes the requisites of followers of Isis in this manner. For as 'tis not the length of their beard or the coarseness of the habit which makes a philosopher, so neither would those frequent shavings or the mere wearing of linen vestment constitute a votary of Isis. But he alone is a true servant or follower of this goddess, who after he has heard and been made acquainted in a proper manner with the history of the actions of these gods, searches into the hidden truth which lie concealed under them. and examines the whole by the dictates of reason and philosophy. During the Middle Ages, the troubadours of Central Europe preserved in song the legends of this Egyptian goddess. They composed sonnets to the most beautiful woman in the world, though few ever discovered her identity. She was Sophia, the Virgin of Wisdom, whom all the philosophers of the world have wooed. Isis represents the mystery of motherhood, which the ancients recognized as the most apparent proof of nature's omniscient wisdom and God's overshadowing power. To the modern seeker, she is the epitome of the great unknown, and only those who veil her will be able to solve the mysteries of life, death, regeneration, and generation. Mummification of the Egyptian dead. Servius, commenting on Virgil's Aeneid, observes that the wise Egyptians took care to embalm their bodies and deposit them in the catacombs in order that the soul might be preserved for a long time in connection with the body and might not soon be alienated, while the Romans, with its opposite design, committed the remains of their dead to the funeral pyre, intending that the vital spark might immediately be restored to the general element to return to the pristine nature. From Pritchard's Analysis of the Egyptian Mythology. No complete records are available which give the secret doctrine of Egyptians concerning the relationship existing between the spirit or consciousness and the body which is inhabited. It is reasonably certain, however, that Pythagoras, who had been initiated in the Egyptian temples when he propagated the doctrine of metempsychosis, restated in part, at least, the teachings of the Egyptian initiates. The popular supposition that the Egyptians mummified their dead in order to preserve the form for a physical resurrection is untenable in the light of modern knowledge regarding their philosophy of death. In the fourth book of An Abstinence from Animal Food, Porphyry describes an Egyptian custom of purifying the dead by removing the contents of the abnormal cavity, which they place in a separate chest. He then reproduces the following oration, which had been translated out of the Egyptian tongue by Euphantius. A sovereign son and all ye gods who impart life to men, receive me and deliver me to the eternal gods as a cohabitant. For I always piously worship those divinities which were appointed out to me by my parents as long as I live in divinities which were at this age, and have likewise always honored those who procreated my body. And with respect to other men, I have never slain anyone, nor defrauded anyone of what he disposed with me. Deposited with me, nor have I committed any other atrocious deed. If therefore during my life I had acted erroneously by eating or drinking things which is unlawful to eat or drink, I have not erred through myself, but through these, pointing to the chest which contain the viscera. The removal of the organs identified as the seat of the appetites, which considered equivalent to the purification of the body from their evil influences. Very interesting. So literally did the early Christians interpret their scriptures that they preserved the bodies of their dead by pickling them in salt water, so that on the day of resurrection, the spirit of the dead might re-enter a complete and perfectly preserved body, believing that the incisions necessary to embalming process and the removal of the eternal organs would prevent the return of the spirit to its body. The Christians buried their dead without resorting to the more elaborate mummification methods employed by the Egyptian morticians. In his work on Egyptian magic, SSDD hazards the following speculation concerning the esoteric purposes behind the practice of mummification. Quote, there is every reason to suppose, he says, that only those who had received some grade of initiation were mummified, for it is certain that in the eyes of the Egyptians, mummification effectually prevented reincarnation. Reincarnation was necessary to imperfect souls, to those who had failed to pass the test of initiation. But for those who had the will and the capacity to enter the secret addendum, they were seldom necessary for that liberation of the soul, which is said to be effected by the destruction of the body. The body of the initiate was therefore preserved after death as a species of talisman or material basis for the manifestation of the soul upon earth. During the period of its inception, mummification was limited to the pharaoh and such other persons of royal rank as presumably partook of the attributes of the great Osiris, the divine mummified king of the Egyptian underworld. And that ends that portion of the book. Next time, I'm going to read The Sun, a Universal Deity. So that is The Secret Teachings of Old Ages by Manly P. Hall. Please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Sharing is caring. Lionsgate is in front of us. It's heading our way. And I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Sending each and every one of you love and light. And please don't forget, if you get anything from my work, I'm in desperate times. Helping is caring in any way that you possibly can. So I want to thank everybody with much love and gratitude from my heart to yours. See you in the next one. Bye.